Hey guys, Brian Kelly from Zombie Guitar here. Here in today's video, I want to revisit my most popular YouTube video, which is how to easily learn songs by ear. In this video, we're going to do a different song, but the process is basically going to be the same. The reason I'm revisiting this video is because that is my one and only YouTube video that has ever exceeded 1 million views. The production quality on that last video was crap, but the content was pretty good. Now, hopefully my production quality has improved over the last 4 years. We're going to do the same thing, but it's going to be better. So before we get into the lesson, I just want to point out 3 things. The first one is that this is going to be about the song Say It Ain't So by Weezer, and that song is actually played half-step down-tuned on the album. This guitar is standard tuned. So if I try to figure out how to play Say It Ain't So using a standard tuned guitar, and I look up the chords online or something like that, and you play those chords on a standard tuned guitar, it's not going to match with the album. That's because this is standard tuned, but they tune their guitars down by 1/2 step. It doesn't matter though. I can still figure out any song by ear no matter what tuning my guitar's in. All right, so we're going to figure out the song by ear on a standard tuned guitar. And then at the end of the video, I want to show you how to transpose to a different key so you can play it the same way Weezer played it. Because it does kind of matter, because there's some open strings and stuff that are involved with the actual album version, which cannot be played the way that we're going to do it. The second thing is we're going to be using guitar theory concepts to help us to learn this song by ear for the guitar. Guitar theory differs from general music theory in that it's heavily based on shapes and patterns. So like this shape right here, this is a chord. So it's going to have different notes than this chord, which is going to be different notes than this chord, which is going to be different notes than this chord. So you see the shape remains the same the entire time, but the notes are changing. That's guitar theory in a nutshell. I made a whole detailed video about guitar theory if you want to check that one out. But the prerequisite to guitar theory is you want to know the notes on your low E string and on the A string. If you can't instantly recall the notes on the other strings, that's not a problem. You can do so much stuff just by knowing the notes on your low E string and the A string. And the third thing is, if you like this video, stop by, check out my website, zombieguitar.com. That has been my labor of love for the last 8 years. There's over 4,000 videos on there. There's a bunch of written lessons. There's a bunch of backing tracks. There's all kinds of cool stuff on there. It has been my labor of love for, as I said, 8 years. I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I work on it every single day. I'm constantly uploading new content to it. The only thing that's ever going to stop me from continuing to grow Zombie Guitar is some sort of a natural disaster, or if robots take over the world or something like that. But if that stuff doesn't happen, I'm still going to be working on Zombie Guitar, and I'm still going to be here to answer your questions. So thank you very much for checking out my website and my video. Let's get into it. Step 1, determine the key. This is the absolute most important step out of the entire process. Reason being is because once you can successfully determine the key of the song that you're trying to figure out by ear, then you don't have to worry about trying to guess out of all of the possible chords and all of the possible notes. A key consists of exactly 7 notes and exactly 7 chords. So if you can determine the key of the song, then you have a little pool of stuff for which it could be. You try to figure out the song using chord 1. Nope, that's not it. Okay, try chord 2. Nah, that's not it either. Try chord 3. Oh, that seems to be the chord. Next chord. It's much, much easier once you know what key you're in. So the way that I personally like to do this, and I find this to be the absolute most fast and efficient way to determine the key of a song that you're trying to figure out, is to do what I refer to as the pentatonic test. The way that the pentatonic test works is you take this pentatonic box right here. I'm sure you've seen this. If you've been playing guitar for any number of years, you've probably seen this pattern before. This is pentatonic position number 1. Pentatonic position number 1 is the same for any key on the guitar. It doesn't matter. Pentatonic position number 1 can be played starting out on the open E string like this. It could be started out on the 1st fret like this. It could be started on the 2nd fret. And so on. Once you get up to the 12th fret, you're just repeating yourself, because playing starting on the 12th fret is exactly the same thing as the open E string. Everything on the guitar between open and 12 is exactly the same as from 12 and on. Most guitars run out of frets before you have a full additional 12 frets. 24 fret guitars, they have exactly 12 more frets, but everything is exactly the same. So point being, if you can successfully find the pentatonic box that locks in with the music that you're listening to and trying to play, that is how you know that you have found your key. So let me just give you a quick demonstration of what this pentatonic test looks like and sounds like. So as you could see, the pentatonic position number 1 that locked in with the music was the one that fell right here between frets 8 and 11. That was what told me my key. Now, I understand that not everyone is going to have the ability to be able to hear the correct pentatonic box. This comes with time, this comes with practice. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. I started out by playing the same lick over and over and over until I eventually got to this one. And I was like, yep, that's the one that sounds correct. Once I found the one that sounded correct, I then proceeded to noodle around some more. Noodling around just means that you're just playing any notes at random. It doesn't matter what order you play them at. It doesn't matter what speed you play them at. You just play any notes at random in the pentatonic box that you think might be the correct one. If you start to hear some notes that don't sound too good, like some notes are like, it didn't sound all that great, then it's probably not the right one. By the time I got to here, I tested it out. I noodled around. I didn't hear any sour notes. I was like, okay, that's most likely the right one. Now, if the pentatonic test alone is not convincing enough for you, you can always proceed to do the diatonic test. Keep in mind that the pentatonic scale is only 5 notes. It looks like more because it spans across 6 strings and it has 2 notes on each string. So it looks like more than just 5 notes, but that's really all it is. 5 notes, nothing more, nothing less. The diatonic scale is 7 notes. That's all of the notes of the key. So when you play just the pentatonic scale, you're just omitting 2 of the 7 total notes. When you go ahead and you include those other 2 notes into your box pattern, you now have more notes for which you can do this test for. If the pentatonic test down here sounded pretty good, it was iffy, you weren't quite sure, go ahead and do the diatonic test. Go ahead and add those missing notes in here, and you're definitely going to hear some sour notes. If you are in the correct pentatonic box, both the pentatonic scale and the diatonic scale are going to sound good. So the diatonic test just gives you further confirmation that yes, you have selected the right box.
Oh yeah.
Alright, so now that I have successfully found the correct pentatonic box, how do I take this information and get the key out of it? This is where knowing the notes in your low E string comes in handy. So here's our pentatonic box right between frets 8 and 11. So the one that falls underneath your index finger, that's going to be the minor name of the key that you're in. The one that falls underneath your pinky finger, that's going to be the major name of the key that you're in. So if I know my notes on my low E string, and I know that my correct pentatonic box falls in between frets 8 and 11, the note on fret 8 is C. The note on fret 11 is E flat. So this information tells me that the key of this music that we're playing in is the key of C minor or the key of E flat major. So with that information, I can now turn to the circle of fifths. I happen to have the circle of fifths tattooed on my arm right here, so it's convenient. But if you don't have it tattooed on your arm like I do, you could always just use an image that you find on Google, or you can just use the screen right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the E flat on the outer circle. The outer circle is all the major keys. The inner circle is all the minor keys. Now, major keys have relative minors. Minor keys have relative majors. What that means is that for every major key, there's exactly one minor key that shares all of the same stuff. The key of E flat major has the exact same 7 notes as the key of C minor, and vice versa. The 7 chords that are found in the key of E flat major are the exact same 7 chords that are found in the key of C minor. It's the same pool of chords. You can call this the key of E flat major, you can call this the key of C minor, and you'd be right in both instances. So the cool thing about the circle of fifths is that once you know your major key and your relative minor key, it forms a nice little grouping of 6, and that's all the chords that are part of your key. Not all 7 chords, but 6 out of the 7. In any given key, you have 3 major chords, 3 minor chords, and 1 diminished chord. So this circle of fifths that I'm using, it doesn't display diminished chords on it. It just displays major chords on the outer circle and then minor chords on the inner circle. So this will give you your 3 major and 3 minor chords for the key in question, which is the key of E flat major or the key of C minor. So here's these 6 chords that I have. This is my pool of chords. I no longer have to guess out of all of the possible major chords and all of the possible minor chords. I have this nice little handful of 6 chords. So I'm going to play along with the song now, and let's see how it works.
Oh yeah.
As you could hear by that demo, I was pretty close, but there was something that was just not quite right, and that was that second chord there. I wasn't happy with that second chord, and that's what I want to talk about next. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is identify outside chords. So before we get into this section, I just wanted to point out that if you guys are liking this new video quality, this new editing stuff I'm doing, this is all a thanks to my friend Chris, who is a member of the Zombie Guitar Members Facebook group. I already had the camera, I already had the lights, I already had a bit of video editing experience and whatnot. I did a 1-hour Zoom meeting with this guy, and he fixed me right up. So if you think the picture quality is much, much better, that's from his expertise. He was just like, do this, change that, move the lights like this, bada bing, bada boom. So yeah, highly recommended. Hit that guy up if you are in need of that type of work. So anyway, on with the lesson. So once you've identified your key, which then gives you your 6 chords, your 3 major and your 3 minor chords, the easiest way to identify out of key chords, and this is the way that songwriters think too, they'll say, okay, I'm in this key, I have these 3 major, these 3 minor chords, I'm just going to make this minor chord into a major chord, or vice versa. That's the easiest way to start doing things. So in this song that we're trying to figure out, you notice that the second chord, so it didn't quite sound right. The rest of the chords sounded okay. All right, so it's that second chord. So I'm just going to try making it major.
Oh yeah.
So when it comes to making the switch, changing one of the minor chords into a major or vice versa, the 2 most common chords that you're going to see this done to, if you look at your circle of fifths and you look at the grouping of 6, the chord that's in the inner circle clockwise position, that chord is very often made into a major chord. So that's the first place I usually look. The other one is if you take the outer circle counterclockwise position chord, that chord is often made into a minor chord. So the first one of these is actually what's being done in this song here, but just for the sake of demonstrating, I just want to show you what it sounds like when you take that other chord, outer circle, counterclockwise position, and make that minor. You've heard this before, definitely. So check this out. So here we go. I'm sure you've heard that before. That's actually called a minor plagal cadence, just to be a nerd about it. But yeah, that's a very common thing to do as well. That's not done in this song. That chord has not been made minor, but the other one has been done. So since we're talking about taking minor chords and turning them into major chords and vice versa, it would help if you know how to play major and minor chords all up and down the entire neck of the guitar. As I said, the cool thing about the guitar is everything's movable. You can know a chord shape and you can move it up and down the entire neck of the guitar, maintaining the same shape, but it's going to change the actual notes and the actual chord based on where you play it on the fretboard. So in order to be able to do this, you need to know 4 shapes. There's going to be 2 major chord shapes and 2 minor chord shapes. That's all. There's going to be a major chord and a minor chord rooted on the A string, and there's going to be a major chord and minor chord rooted on the low E string. So the shapes that are rooted on the A string look like this. This is what a minor chord shape looks like. And this is what a major chord shape rooted on the A string looks like. And then you have your low E string chords. So this is what a minor chord shape rooted on the low E string looks like. And this is what a major chord shape rooted on the low E string looks like. So with those 4 shapes, you can play any major chord, any minor chord, anywhere on the entire neck of the guitar. All you need to know is the notes on your low E string and on your A string. So if you noticed in that demo, I played twice around. I played it like this one time. The second time around, I went like this. So it's a slightly different sound versus, but it's still an E flat major chord. That's the important thing. The reason I did that is because major chords rooted on the A string are a bit difficult for some people. People tend to like shapes that look like this, where you have your index finger, your 3rd and 4th finger kind of playing like a power chord. I don't mean to flip you off here. And then your 2nd finger is kind of playing another note. So minor chord shapes rooted on the A string have that shape. Major chords rooted on the low E string also have that shape. Major chords rooted on the A string have this shape, and this is a little tricky for some people because it's not always easy to get the note on the high E string. You have to kind of move your hand a little bit, flip off the camera a little bit, you know. It's not easy. So if you can't play this shape right here, you could just play a major chord but rooted on the E string instead. And then if you hit the high E string as well, all right, so it's the same chord, it's just an easier way to play it. That's it. One last thing regarding outside chords. If you have your grouping of 6, which gives you your in-key chords, and you've tried flipping the major and minor quality and none of them seem to be doing the trick, you can always look to neighboring groupings of 6. So we have our initial grouping of 6 right here. The neighboring grouping of 6 right here is a very common place for people to borrow chords from. They call it borrowed chords. Or you could look in the other direction, that grouping of 6 as well. You can borrow chords from there. Very, very common. So if absolutely nothing is working, you can't find it within your grouping of 6, try the neighboring grouping of 6 in either direction. So these neighboring groupings of 6 are referred to as parallel keys. So if we are calling this initial key that we're in, we're calling this the key of C minor. The neighboring grouping of 6 in the clockwise direction, that's the key of C major. Those are the chords from the key of C major. C minor, C major, parallel major minor pair. You can also go in the other direction. You can say, okay, this initial key is the key of E flat major. So if you go in the other direction, those would be the chords of E flat minor. And actually those two outside chords that I demonstrated in the very beginning, the two most commonly borrowed chords, those two chords are borrowed from neighboring groupings of 6. If you take this G minor chord and you make it into a G major chord, you could say that G major chord was borrowed from the key of C major. Or if you take that A flat major chord and you turn it into a minor chord, you could say that that was borrowed from the parallel key of E flat minor. You just have to change the flats to sharps. That's why music theory is a little confusing. The sharps and flat things, it tends to confuse people sometimes, but really that's where it is. They're coming from these neighboring groupings of 6. So that's where you're going to find most of your outside chords. All right, so now we're going to talk about the fills, the solos, and all of the little embellishments that take place. So we've already done the bulk of the work by determining the key. The key helps us out with everything, including this stuff. That's not to say that this stuff is necessarily easy. It's just that if you know what key you're in, it becomes much, much, much easier. No matter what, you're going to have to use your ear. It doesn't matter if you're using tabs or if you're actually reading sheet music, unless you're like an amazing sight reader or something like that that can just look at a piece of music that you've never heard before and play it exactly as it's written. Unless you have that type of ability, you're going to have to rely on your ear. All right? I've been doing this for 30 years. I've learned thousands of songs. I used to use tabs all the time. I don't use tabs anymore. I just do everything by ear now. But even when I'm using tabs, I am constantly just play, rewind, hundreds of times. Maybe thousands of times. I don't know. As many times as it takes to get it. I'm just going to show you a little clip right here of me trying to figure out the one fill in the song. There's actually more than one fill and a solo in this song. I'm just going to talk about one single fill. So I just want you to watch how I actually look when I'm trying to figure out something by ear. This is what it looks like. Now, that said, if you know what key you're in, you can really simplify your life. I'm talking about majorly simplifying your life. The reason being is because on the guitar, all you need to do is memorize 3 patterns, and you can play across the entire neck of the guitar in any key. You memorize these 3 patterns one single time for one single key, and you can do the exact same thing in any key. We're in the key of C minor or E flat major. There's 7 notes that make up this key. Our objective is to map out those 7 notes across the entire fretboard, because all the fills, all the solos, all the vocal melody lines, all of the vocal harmony lines, the bass line, all of that stuff is using these 7 notes. So the objective of these 3 patterns is to simply map out these 7 in-key notes for the key that we're playing in. Now to locate this first pattern, you're going to take your index finger and put it on the minor scale root on the low E string. Or you can take your pinky finger and put it on the major scale root on the low E string. Our minor scale root is C, our major scale root is E flat. So on the low E string, we have a C right here on the 8th fret, and we have an E flat right here on the 11th fret. This is going to be pattern number 1. Now you could also play pattern number 1 up here if you happen to have a 24 fret guitar, because up here on the 20th fret you have a C, and then up here on the 23rd fret you have an E flat. So I can play pattern number 1 up here, but not everyone is going to have 24 frets, so you may not be able to get pattern number 1 in the higher octave, but that's no problem. Right here is pattern number 1, just worry about that one. Let's look for pattern number 2 now. Pattern number 2, again, minor scale root, major scale root, but it's going to be on the A string this time. So here's a C right here, 3rd fret. Here's a E flat right here, 6th fret. So this is going to be how you identify your pattern number 2. The same thing can be found up here, because here's a C right here, 15th fret, and then here's an E flat right here, 18th fret. So here's your pattern number 2 up here as well. So as you can see, we're already starting to almost cover the entire fretboard. Now we just need one more pattern. And the way you identify this pattern is you take your index finger, you put it on the major scale root on the low E string, right there, E flat, and then you just play this pattern right here, and that completes the fretboard. So once I mapped out my fretboard, then I can go ahead and I can listen to the song, and I can just listen, okay, does that sound like it's in like the low register of the guitar? Does it sound like it's kind of in the middle register? Or does it sound like it's in the high register? So just listening to it, it sounded like it was like somewhere in the middle right here, you know. So, you know, I have my 3 patterns, like, is it this pattern? Is it this pattern? Maybe it's kind of like a mix of the two. It's just, but I have my notes. I have a roadmap to identify. So when I was listening to this, I heard him do this, like, it sounded like he was playing 1 note on each string, and that's exactly what he was doing. The actual lick is something like this. Something like that. So this first part, it just sounded like he was playing a chord there. It sounded like he was just playing 1 note per string. So then I just looked at what chord was actually occurring in the rhythm section during that part. So through repetitive listening to it over and over and over, you can hear that the little fill that he plays starts on the 4th chord of the progression. So the progression is... So right when it gets to that chord, that's when the solo kicks in. So that's that E flat major chord. So I'm like, okay, if that's an E flat major chord and it sounds like he's playing in the middle register of the guitar, not high, not low, but around here, let me try just playing this. Oh, there we go. It matched up perfectly with the song. Okay, so that's what he's doing. He's playing this chord. Think like a guitar player. All guitar players more or less think similarly, you know. So he's thinking, okay, we're on this chord, I'm going to play the notes of that chord right there using a basic major bar chord shape rooted on the A string. So, and then I heard the high note, so I'm like, oh, where's that high note at? No, that's not it. Oh, there it is. Okay. You know, just kind of step by step by step, just rewind, try again, rewind, try again, rewind, try again. And then for the rest of it, even though it took a little bit of time to get the actual phrasing down so I could play it exactly how I just played on the track, I still had my roadmap. So I wasn't guessing all the notes. I still like had my patterns in mind. So I knew like which frets were not part of the key and which frets were part of the key, just because I've mapped out the key across the neck. So identify the key that you're in, map out the entire fretboard by using those 3 patterns that I showed you, and then you're going to be a lot closer to figuring out what is going on than, you know, if you were just randomly guessing. If you don't know anything about this key information, if you don't know anything about these patterns, you just have this giant matrix of notes and you're like, how am I ever going to figure this out? This is crazy impossible. It's much easier when you know the key. So last but not least is transposing to other keys. This is a very useful skill to have, and it's very, very easy to do if you're a guitar player, because everything on the guitar is movable. So if you know your chords for key 1 and you want to play it in a different key, which would be key 2, you just take all of those shapes that you played and you just move it up the fretboard or down the fretboard a little bit. If you have a solo or a lead or a fill or anything and you play it here, Well, you just play the exact same thing, the same pattern, the same lick, the same phrasing, everything, but you just move it up to the new key, or you move it down to the new key, whatever the new key happens to be. So our chord progression was a minor chord rooted on the A string, which was played right here on the 3rd fret. It then moved to a major chord rooted on the low E string on the 3rd fret. Then a major chord rooted on the low E string, 4th fret. And then a major chord rooted on the A string, 6th fret. So that's our progression right there. So let's say that we just want to move this up a half step. Instead of playing in the key of C minor, we want to play in the key of C sharp minor. All you have to do is just move everything up by 1 fret. So this is now going to be our first chord. And then everything's the same. You can also use the circle of fifths and see that the positioning within the grouping of 6 remains constant for both keys. We start with the inner circle center position chord. We then move to the inner circle clockwise chord made major. We then move to the outer circle counterclockwise position. Then we end on the outer circle center position. It's the exact same as we just played. We're just in a new key now. So what actually happens in this song is instead of playing the E up here like this, the final chord, they just play an E like this. So if you think about it, that open E major chord is just like one of these guys that we already played right here. It's just that we don't need to bar with our first finger because the open strings are already doing that for us. You know, you could also do the same thing up here on the 12th fret. You could also play an E major chord right here on the 7th fret of the A string. There's a bunch of different ways to do the same thing. So the actual chord progression is so they just play the last chord all the way down there in the open cowboy chord position. We just couldn't do that before because we were trying to match up with the album, and in order to do that on a standard tuned guitar, we had to shift everything down by a fret, and there's no E flat open chord, so we had to compensate by instead playing it up here. But now that we're playing it the way that Weezer actually plays it, but our guitar is still in standard tuning, so it's going to be a key higher than Weezer. But now that we're playing it the way they are, now we can get this final chord in like that. And also, now that we're playing it the way that Weezer plays, you can also do... That's actually what they do. They hit this chord and then lift up like that. And if you try to do that in the key that we started out trying to figure out, like... it doesn't sound right. That's why Weezer plays it like this. Ooh, what was that little fill? Oh, there we go. I know my position number 1, pentatonic 1. For the key that we're in, we're now in the key of C sharp minor or E major because we transposed to a new key. There's my pentatonic position number 1. There's the C sharp right on the low E string. There's the E on the low E string. So there's my pentatonic position number 1. You know, guitar players, we all do the same stuff. And then regarding mapping out the entire fretboard for the key that you're in, we're now in the key of C sharp minor, E major. So minor scale root is C sharp, major scale root is E. So let's find pattern number 1. Minor goes on C sharp, major goes on E. So there's pentatonic position number 1. You can also find it up here. So minor, major, you might not have a 24 fret guitar, so don't worry about that. Let's find pattern number 2. So we have to find C sharp on the A string with our index or E on the A string with our pinky. So there's C sharp right there. There's E right there. So here's our second pattern. There's a C sharp right there. There's an E right there. There's that second pattern again. Third pattern, take your index finger, put it on the major scale root. Our major scale root is now E. There's an E right there. And then here's our pattern. And then also now that we're in this new key, this pattern right here is also found in full down here. Here's your open E. So that's going to be the start of this pattern. And then that whole fill part that we figured out already, we just shift everything up 1 fret. So instead of playing this fill starting right here using this chord shape, starting on the 6th fret of the A string, we just move it up a fret because we've moved everything else up by 1 fret. So we're starting right here, and then you put your pinky there. Alright, so transposing on the guitar is very, very easy. Mapping out the key on the guitar is difficult, but you only have to do it one single time. If you map out the key one single time, then you're good. Then you can just move these patterns around. You can move your chord shapes around to accommodate for the key that you're playing in. So that is how to learn songs by ear. That is my approach. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask. And if you want to check out my website, zombieguitar.com, I'd really appreciate it. See you next time.